Domestic violence is one of the best kept secrets in families and intimate relationships. Every 9 seconds in the U.S., a woman is assaulted. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence reports that 1.3 million women are assaulted by their partner every year. Every day in the U.S., more than 3 women are murdered by their husbands or boyfriends. One study reports that 40% of the victims are men who have had a deadly weapon used against them. One of the missions of CLR Community Empowerment is to break the silence and shed light on the ever-growing problem in our society. Stay tuned to learn about your legal rights and where you can get help if you are suffering from any form of abuse. Welcome to this edition of Stop Family Violence, Breaking the Silence, a program designed to increase public awareness about physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, a platform for you to get help. I am your host, Attorney Phyllis J. Outlaw. On behalf of CLR Community Empowerment, for your questions and comments, go to www.clrcommunity.org. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Casey Simmons. Casey is a credentialed domestic violence trainer with over 14 years of experience educating the public on family violence. Casey has worked with the South Carolina Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault, survivors and advocates for empowerment with D.C. Superior Court, National Center for Victims of Crime, and Victim Services Branch, the Metropolitan Police Department. Hello, Casey. It is certainly a pleasure to have you with us.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Casey, I want you to share with our listening audience, what is domestic violence?
Domestic violence is an overarching term. So most people consider it to be a fight between a man and a woman who are in a relationship. But it can include a number of relationships. It has to do with domestic, which means in the home. But it could be that there's violence just within 2 parties. For example, siblings, people who are dating, but even roommates could be considered victims of domestic violence.
And share with our audience the different forms of domestic violence.
Sure. So we typically categorize them in 4 different areas. There's physical assault, which is the most obvious, when someone's been physically abused. Sexual assault, psychological abuse, and then verbal abuse.
Well, it's funny because most people think of physical abuse as the only type of abuse.
Mm-hmm.
But talk a little bit about emotional abuse.
Well, we kind of put emotional abuse with psychological abuse, and that's often paired with the verbal abuse and considered to be the most damaging. That's what lasts the longest. How someone treated you affects how you see yourself. Whether or not they've used manipulative ways affects how you deal with other people, and it can also bleed over into other relationships. So usually with the emotional abuse, there is no physical assault. It could be tied to a physical act. For example, hitting a wall. Well, that's intended to send a threat, which has an emotional effect. It has an emotional response. I'm fearful, but you haven't hit me. And so it's sending a message without doing the physical assault.
Many times, and I've had persons tell me that they can be abusive sexually. Talk a little bit about that.
I think a lot of times we are under the impression that people have their own sexual rights. And in a lot of relationships where there's abuse, we may see children come from those relationships. They may not have had the opportunity to say no. In power and control dynamics, people typically are considered property of the other person. And so they don't have the option of saying no, or it's just not respected once they say no.
Let's talk a little bit about financial abuse.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of partners in domestic violence situations, one may work and the other may not. That financial abuse can look like, give me all your money from your paycheck. It could look like that person provides the financial support, so the other party is then responsible for taking care of the home and listening and obeying, which is also where that power and control dynamic comes in again. So it could look differently, the financial abuse. It could be how much money I give you for groceries this week, or whether or not I'm going to give you money for the kids for school. We look at a number of different things to determine patterns of behavior, which is really key to domestic violence in general. All of these things can happen, in a microcosm once. But if it's a pattern of behavior, then that's when we start to look at this as a form of abuse.
Now, many times folk relate financial abuse to it being the man being the breadwinner and the woman being in the subordinate position. But now that women are beginning to make more money than men, how is that being played out in relationships?
Well, what you've described is a very antiquated view. Most of our clients are, most of my clients who are domestic violence survivors and victims are the breadwinners. They get up and they go to work, and they're expected to turn over their income to whoever the abusive party is.
So that could be male or female.
Absolutely.
But what are you finding, for example, if a man is unemployed and his wife is the one who's the breadwinner? Can she now become abusive and be controlling as it relates to him?
Well, absolutely. And that may start with the verbal abuse, making sure they know that they don't contribute, they now wear the pants, that sort of thing. We never want to give the impression that women are the only victims of violence. They are the majority of the victims. But men can be victims of domestic violence as well.
Around the world, at least 1 in every 3 women has been beaten, coerced into sex, or otherwise abused during her lifetime. In the work that you've done, are you finding this to be the case? Do those numbers seem to be playing out?
Absolutely. We never have a slowdown of clients. There's usually an influx. We can see that based on the seasons, the change of time, different ceremonies or activities that happen, for example, during football season. If there's a loss of a game, then we see the increase in the assaults there.
That's interesting.
So,
if there's a loss of a football game, then one of the mates may become more abusive.
Absolutely, sure. It's also the time when people are drinking, and alcohol does play a part in whether or not or how violent the assault can get.
Well, talk about the influence of alcohol versus drugs when it comes to abusive relationships.
What I always make sure our clients are aware of is that alcohol or drugs are not the reason for domestic violence. They can increase the danger. It could make it easier for the abuser to go ahead and do what they were going to do in the first place. It could give them what we call liquid courage. But that's never the reason why. And we make sure we make that clear to the clients, because if that perpetrator decides to go get help for the drinking and the alcohol and the abuse, the drug abuse, and they don't go get the treatment for the power and control, they may be clean and sober and still be an abuser.
Did I hear you say liquid courage? Let's talk about that. What is liquid courage?
Liquid courage, a lot of times abusers are really bullies. They're people who would not normally do anything without some other impetus. And, alcohol has a way of lowering inhibitions and allowing people to do things they wouldn't normally do. And so we call it liquid courage.
That's interesting. Now, I'm finding that clients are coming into me and they're seniors, and they're complaining about the children who are their caretakers. And these children may very well be either speaking to the parent in an abusive language or beating the parent or taking their money. And I understand this constitutes senior abuse. Just take a couple of seconds and talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So as I mentioned before, domestic violence is the overarching term, but it includes elder abuse. Elders are typically vulnerable persons, but with the aging baby boomers, you're going to see people who are lively, vivacious, but are turning over a lot of their trust, their financial information to their kids. Most elder abuse cases are not done purposefully. They don't happen on purpose. The child or the caretaker may be uninformed. They may be overwhelmed. There's plenty of resources to help people in those circumstances, but it does happen. And those are some of the worst cases, because parents don't typically want to report their children to the police. We have had some really sad cases where they just refuse to, and we know that they're being abused.
Let's talk just a little bit about hearing impaired. Are you finding that abuse takes place in those types of, in that culture as well?
Absolutely. Now, the people who are hearing impaired see themselves as fully able-bodied individuals. They just aren't able to hear. So they're no different than any other relationship. And they do have different barriers, though. Trusting the world that can hear, being able to confide in people outside of their environment. They're a very close-knit community. And then having resources that can provide interpretation for them. You make sure that you have a couple people on staff, because you can only have someone interpret for 30 to 45 minutes. If this has been an ongoing situation of abuse, you may have to hire people or make sure they have what they need so that there's understanding.
In the arena of domestic violence, are there stats or incidences that deal with persons of the same sex?
Oh, sure. Thankfully, DC statute is very overarching as well. So it includes same-sex relationships. The omnibus bill helped to extend what that statute includes. Same-sex relationships see violence. All intimate partner relationships at some point can potentially see violence. And so, of course, even if they're in the same, even if they're same-sex relationships, they experience domestic violence as well.
Now, let's take a look at teenage dating.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening in that area?
The point of domestic violence is to pay attention to the fact that there's an intra-family or intimate partner relationship. Once that's established, no matter how old you are, no matter what disability you have, no matter whether or not you're same sex, or if you're just a teenager, there's a potential for violence there. And so unfortunately, there is teen dating violence. They may witness what their parents have gone through. They may see a lot of things in the media. They may accept lots of unhealthy behavior because we haven't taught them what healthy relationships look like. And so every facet of the community, every part of society can experience domestic violence.
We've had research that indicate 1 out of 5 teenagers, or teenage girls, have been assaulted by their boyfriend or partner. Are you finding that to be the case?
Sure, and Break the Cycle is actually a website, breakthecycle.org, that has some wonderful stats on there with information that they've been able to garner that we would not normally have been able to get from teenagers. They have notions that their bodies still belong to the first person that they were with, even if they're in another relationship, that the person is allowed to be violent with them as long as they're in a relationship. We did some training in some local high schools just to kind of see where teenagers' minds were, and some of it was quite appalling. Their notion of what is acceptable in a relationship has to be taught, and we're not doing a very good job of that as their parents and the adults that they're around.
And we want to invite the viewers to go to our website, www.clrcommunityempowerment.org, and you'll find there that there are a list of resources that you can contact, like Break the Cycle, for teenagers who've been involved in abusive relationships. We're going to take a break. When we return, we'll be joined by Ray, a recovered offender, who's going to provide insight on how he has developed healthier ways to deal with conflict.
My parents say I have to be home right after work.
That's so gay.
Totally gay.
That is so Emma and Julia.
Imagine if who you are were used as an insult. When you say that's so gay, do you realize what you say? Knock it off.
Welcome back to Stop Family Violence, Breaking the Silence. I'm your host, Attorney Phyllis J. Outlaw. Returning with us is Casey Simmons, a domestic violence specialist, as well as Ray, a recovered offender, who's going to provide insight on how he has developed healthier ways to deal with conflict. Thank you for joining us today, Ray.
Good evening, Ms. Outlaw.
You know, I think it's really courageous that you're coming on today to share with us. I'd like you to share with the audience what your experience was with domestic violence.
My experience in domestic violence, one, I wasn't educated. I didn't know about domestic violence. 2, I went to prison for it. 3, I hurt an individual, and I hurt myself and I hurt my family.
So when you went to prison, how much time were you there?
I did 11 and a half years.
That's a long time. And what were you incarcerated for?
I was incarcerated for first-degree attempt murder.
Is that right?
I pleaded guilty to first-degree assault.
And tell us a little bit about that. When you said for first-degree attempted murder, is that what you said?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm impressed with the fact that you're sharing that with us. What was the circumstances surrounding that?
I had a girlfriend, and we've been in a relationship about 9 years. And I just snapped one night and I stabbed her with a butcher knife.
Now, did she do anything to bring that on?
First, I want to say I'm a Christian brother. Being a non-Christian, when I got in a relationship, I was thinking she did.
Share with us, what did you feel she had done?
A lot of it was mentally. You know, I get badgered. You do certain things. I don't know if this was an incident. I really had never been with a woman that was going through menopause. So I also was thinking it was a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, because one minute she was like this and the next minute she wasn't.
Now, was there a particular incident the night that it happened that just caused you to trigger and to respond in the way that you did?
Maybe a 3-month period where we was going to break up the relationship, and she owed me some money and a vehicle. And I kept waiting and waiting and sitting around, and it always was the excuse, you need insurance, I'm going to do this and that. And then one evening, the young lady here was saying I took a drink. I even did a drug.
That's it.
And when I came home, it was like it enhanced it even more, as she was saying. And I just snapped. I just went upstairs, and I went downstairs, and I just got a butcher knife off the kitchen rack. And I went upstairs. I said, I'm going to make her pay for this. It was like a revenge thing. You hurt me, now it's time for me to hurt you.
So, Casey, let's talk a little bit about issues with power and control. And he's talking about, you know, the fact that she was leading him on for 3 months and making him feel she was going to pay him and she didn't. Does this sound like that type of issue and control piece?
Very much so. So I'm sure at some point in time, and thank you, Ray, for sharing that, there was someone else that had probably disappointed you, maybe owed you something. You didn't go and attack them. You did it with the person that you had the most control with, which was your intimate partner. It was about making someone do something you wanted them to do right then and there.
A little. It was like, it might have been a little other things, like I got counted to alcohol and maybe drug at the time I used, but it was like you owe me. And, you know, I'm a contractor, I do work, and sometimes you want your money. And it was like, I felt I was being abused and used.
Was she saying mean things to you when she was not giving you the money?
Yeah and no, because like you said, this happened over 15 years ago. So I forget about it, but I don't forget about it because I have to learn from my mistakes. You know, I'm here on TV now, maybe I can help somebody just feeling like me, and they won't do what I did.
What kind of advice would you give another man who's in a similar situation, who may be feeling the way that you did, so that he would not resort to the violence?
Well, after the relationship, 2 months before I did what I did, I joined church, best feeling of my life. And 2 months later, I'm in prison looking at life. And I was like, God, what am I doing in here? And I had to man up, and it was like, you did this, so you got to pay for it.
Now, you mentioned church. Is it that you feel that church was not helpful to you at the time, or how do you connect the two together?
Sometimes we mess up. We have a different level we all supposed to be on. And you know, sometimes in the scriptures it talk about you have to suck milk, then you eat your meat. And at the time, I was young. You know, I'm thinking life was going to be all the way all right all the time. I still had the situation that I was thinking wasn't going to be there anymore. So I'm going to say, you know, when I got into this relationship, I wasn't really saved, which doesn't mean anything because you can grow into it. But I was like, you know, you don't, my mother told me if a man hit a woman, you're a coward. My father told me if a man treat me like a woman, you treat her like a man. So now I'm mixed up. Now I still have my own opinion I have to make. So I've learned now, being a Christian man, I should never put my hands on a woman unless it's a life and death thing and I got to defend myself.
And where did you learn that from?
I learned that from going to church, even though my mother told me, you know, don't do it, and my grandmama.
Did the programs while you were incarcerated, was there anything about your experience while you were incarcerated that changed the way you thought about that?
Yeah, because like you said, I didn't know what domestic violence was. You hear about it, but I didn't even know the definition of it. You know, it was your family member It could be your brother. I didn't know. All I hear domestic violence. I had never done it, so I didn't really care or anything. And you know, I just went to classes and found sometime I could, like, say, Miss All, I don't like you. I just verbally assaulted you. But I didn't look at it like that.
When you were younger?
Yeah. You know, I just came up and I said what I wanted to say.
Did you learn that behavior from someone?
A little. Most of it I got to accept on me because my parents did raise me to do right. But, you know, it's hard to say this because I'm on the air. I have family. You know, the first time I seen a man hit a woman, it was my father. He slapped my stepmother in a car. And I was maybe about 6, 7. And he slapped her. He said she was looking at another man. And she said, no, I wasn't. And he got out the car mad. I seen a tear run down her eye, but she was trying to hide it from me. And I was like, Ma, you all right? And I want to cry a little bit because she was holding back her tears and she lied. She said, no, your father didn't hurt me. So my father didn't know. Even though it was my stepmother, she didn't raise me. For a week, I hated my father because he hurt her, and I didn't see why. I didn't know why.
And Casey, in your training, have you found how those kind of traumas in childhood affect adult behavior?
Absolutely. The statistics are astronomical for children who witness domestic violence, or even so much as hear it. They have a higher percentage of being in abusive relationships in the future.
And do you all have a remedy? How are you finding in the work that you do that folk can heal from that piece so that they don't further perpetuate?
Well, I have a saying, it probably isn't the best one in the world, but we push counseling like crack. Everybody needs to be on counseling, particularly the children, because children are very imaginative. If they didn't witness what happened and they heard what happened, they can create what didn't occur. And then you have a whole nother issue on your hands. If they saw it, then they're affected by it. Here, this happened when you're 7 or 8 years old, and you're seeing it play out in a relationship 20, 30 years later. So we push the counseling piece so that people recognize the importance of what a healthy relationship looks like. Ray brought up a great point, which is that he was getting mixed signals from his parents. One was saying you hit people back if they assault you, and the other was saying you never put your hands on someone. We have to make sure we educate children on what healthy relationships are and how they feel. You know, real love doesn't hurt, and being able to convey those messages are really important.
And many say that what you say to a child is not as significant as what they see you do. So whatever they see you do, they're going to do the same thing. Did you feel that being incarcerated made a difference in your life and your perspective on relationships?
Yeah, because like she was saying, I did learn in different training the different types of domestic violence. Some men want to be controlling. Also, let's say the women too. It's a 50-50 thing, you know, but they say the majority of the time it's us men. So I had to go to counseling, which I didn't want to do, because I felt ashamed. I felt bad. Man, you a little punk, man, you hit a woman. But like you just said, the statistics are really crazy. I didn't even believe 1 million something. You know, that's a lot of women. That ain't counting the one that haven't said it, or the men haven't said they've been abused. So after I started getting my counseling, which I was forced to go to, and at first I didn't want to. I meant what I did at the time, and then 5 seconds later I didn't mean it. But it's too late, so I had to pay for my actions. So I had to go to class, and then I had to learn, but I still had to deal with that. Like now, I'm bringing up memories that I try to forget, but sometimes I don't forget it because I don't want to have to do it again.
Yeah. So how do you handle your anger now?
A lot of times I pray. Sometimes I work. I might work, you know, I have a girlfriend there. Before then, I might work 20 hours a day. It kept me out of trouble. It kept my mind off of that. And I didn't even have a relationship for a while because you could get
And I like you telling me you got a girlfriend now. So with you having this girlfriend now, when y'all have disagreements, how do you see yourself acting differently?
1, I don't put my hands on her. 2, I try to save my feelings in a better way. Maybe we can communicate with each other. Well, sometimes that's another problem. We don't have communication when we have these domestic violence situations. Sometimes you can't.
I applaud you for having the courage to come on. I'm praying that there are other men and other women who are listening to you, and that they can be certainly impacted by your story, and understand that there are consequences. People can be incarcerated. Many times in families, cultures, we think violence is normal. So we don't think that you can be incarcerated, that there can be a stay-away order issued against you, and that you have rights. So it is an issue is very silent. People don't talk about it. So I appreciate you coming on, talking about it today. I want to thank you, and I want to thank Casey for coming on and breaking the silence and shedding light on this ever-growing problem in our society. To learn more about how to get help and domestic violence prevention, visit CLRcommunity.org or call 202-548-0585. You can also like our page on Facebook at phyllis.clrcommunity or follow us on Twitter at CLR_outlaw. It's been a pleasure to have you guys here today. And as we wind up the show, Casey, is there anything you'd like to share with our audience?
The most important thing is if you're in a domestic violence relationship, get out and get help. There are plenty of resources to help with emergency relocation, permanent moves, counseling, changing your locks, making sure that you get a fresh start. So just make sure if you have a friend, family member, teacher, confidant, whoever you can tell someone and get the help that you need.
I want to leave you with this thought. One writer says, "The power of God transforms me and affects all that I think, say, and do. In order to change what is happening to me or happening through me, I take a closer look at what is happening within me." Thanks for watching, and I invite you to continue breaking the silence.